Charisma is one of the most powerful forces in the world when you use it for good. But can you use charisma for corruption and evil? Let me show you how some people use charisma for immoral, wicked, and illegal activity. Let's get it. When you look up charisma, the first definition you see is a compelling attractiveness or charm that can inspire devotion in others. If you can harness charisma, you can entice others to follow you, or worse. Let me share some examples of charismatic figures in history who have used their charisma in a dishonorable or wicked way. Napoleon. You probably heard of Napoleon complex, right? The concept is that the first emperor of France, Napoleon Bonaparte, was a conqueror who compensated for his lack of height by seeking power, war, and conquest. We're not actually sure if this played a part in him being a successful warrior, but we know he was a skilled leader. His ability to use his charm was second to none in his era of generals. Napoleon understood human behavior. He would take silver and gold from those he conquered and then share it with the soldiers as a form of gratitude. He would invade countries and let the citizens know he wasn't against them, but he was against their tyrannical leaders. They would often then become his supporters. Napoleon would even join his soldiers in battle and do any job that was required, which inspired loyalty. His level of understanding of psychology was ultimately why he was able to conquer other countries, pillage them, and take their spoils. Adolf Hitler. Hitler was very much a Germany first leader. Hitler was against democracy, and he told Germans they were better than everyone else. The problem is that the people he was talking to were Germans who had been badly beaten and not fully recovered from World War I. They were susceptible to the idea that Germans were inherently made to rule over Europe and ultimately the world. Hitler's charisma was something you may not be aware of. He was a kind boss when he began his rule. If you use your charisma to tell a story to people that are desperate to be heard, it's easy to create this attraction into the abyss, and that's exactly what Hitler did. Unfortunately, he caused the Holocaust with the killing of millions of Jews. Ultimately, his flair for the charismatic brought the country to its knees. David Koresh. Koresh was the leader of the Branch Davidian cult in Waco, Texas. His level of charisma, where he misused scripture, had the congregants believing that many of the men should lead celibate lives, while Koresh himself had lots of wives and children, and some of the wives were actually children themselves. Ultimately, some survivors got out of this place and told stories of sexual abuse. The compound where the cult was located and raided caught fire and burned to the ground with Koresh and 75 others inside. All of this happened because of his evil use of charisma. Fidel Castro. Castro is the former ruler of Cuba for 49 years. Castro himself overthrew a dictator with the promise to hold elections and restore the Constitution. This never happened. Castro brought communism to the island, but never any real industry. Cuba has been impoverished for decades, but Castro resonated with the Cubans because he didn't submit to the United States or take on their culture. Castro did establish free health care, racism was reduced, and free education through college. But Castro was very much a dictator who used his charisma more than anything to lead a nation into continuous poverty. These unethical, charismatic leaders and others have some traits in common you should be aware of. They focus solely on personal goals. The message is built around them and what they do. These leaders discourage diverse opinions. They look for people who parrot their talking points and those only. There's a false sense of acting like they care about people. It's actually the opposite. They care nothing about people, but they use their pain and disillusionment like pawns on a chessboard. Unethical, charismatic leaders need to be admired more than anything. Anything less than pure admiration and loyalty is unacceptable. If you do not admire them, you're against them as far as they're concerned. Unethical charismatic leaders never paint a vision. They always prey on the fears of their followers. Charisma is a powerful tool whether used for good or for evil. Be diligent to understand that everyone who's speaking to you isn't for you. I would encourage you to constantly think for yourself about any topic that a leader is sharing. Does the leader's subject matter align with your values? Are they playing to your fear, or are they sharing an optimistic vision? Most importantly, can you question the leader without getting called names, getting called out by others, and have an honest, open dialogue with that leader? If you can't do these things in any area with a leader, that leader is not looking out for your best interest. Make a plan to leave this leader's purview. They are leading you down a bad path, which could lead to blind loyalty, dishonesty, and possibly dangerous circumstances. Charisma is one of the greatest forces on the planet, but as with every great force in the wrong hands, it's still just as powerful. Develop your charisma, and if you develop the ability to lead others, lead with kindness, character, and a moral compass, as well as ethical behavior. If you remember these important points, you'll never fall into the dark side of charisma, and people will appreciate you and remember in a positive way that charisma is irrefutably your superpower.